It's a thrill to be here this afternoon. It's so exciting, especially to my left-wing friends that who follow me on Twitter. About 10 minutes ago, I posted I'm going to be talking on social issues for dummies, and they're already retweeting it, so you know it's going to be good. So I want to introduce myself, for not every one of you might know me. I come to you from Missouri, the state of Missouri. And when I ran 20 years ago for the O'Fallon City Council, I realized that one of the biggest problems we had, when I asked the chief of police, what is the biggest problem with our city? And I was expecting maybe shoplifting or burglaries. No, it was domestic violence, which is a social issue. After I got elected, I started trying to find out what else we could do to make the city better, found out we didn't have any obscenity ordinance and got everybody all riled up over that. So that's a social issue. Now, a lot of people get confused, and we're going to get into what the difference is, but folks, it's all social issues. So the reason we call it social issues for dummies is because you wonder, surely nobody in here is a dummy, okay? But I'm emboldening you so that you can go home and help your friends and colleagues and other people in your vast network to do better. And it's possible that some of them may fit in this category that need help. Now, why dummies? I'll tell you why. Just a few little examples. This is kind of the enjoyable part. Veggie straws. My daughter went to the store and bought a bag of veggie straws, and it says on the top, sensible portions. That's all it says is sensible portions. This is a sensible portion. Then she went and got some frozen pizza. And this is why we do the Talk for Dummies. It says on the front here, cook before serving. It's a frozen pizza, folks. Have any of you ever seen anybody eat a frozen pizza frozen? And if you were charged with the duty of creating the package, would you have written on it, cook before serving? And then it says the right way to cook it is to bring it to an internal temperature of 160 degrees. Who has ever seen anybody stick a thermometer into a pizza to see if it's 160 degrees? And I brought one more fun thing. Actually, back by popular demand. How many of you went to Coeur d'Alene? Many of you? In case you forgot, this is the soap they gave us. And it says on here, and Howard liked this one. He was sitting right there, and he thought it was funny. It says, this innovative, ergonomically shaped waste-reducing soap has been designed to eliminate the unused center of traditional soap bars. So what they did, have any of you noticed that you'd never use the center of your soap? So this is what they gave us in the hotel, yes. And it solved the problem. The problem with America is people are not using the center of their soap bar.
Probably because of a lawyer's lawsuit, so we're going to cover you know what.
Probably. Now, because we're in Tennessee, I couldn't resist this last one. How many of you are from Tennessee? Let me see. A lot of you. And that makes you special. I was in Tennessee a few weeks ago, and I picked up this newspaper called The Tennessean. And on page 2, just to know why we're doing the Talk for Dummies, it has an article called Sex Weeks Sparks Lawmakers' Fury. Apparently, your University of Tennessee wanted to have a sex week. Yeah, and the legislators say the 6-day event sends the wrong message about the University of Tennessee and about the entire state. So this one lawmaker says, I support the First Amendment rights, says the resolution sponsor, Richard Floyd of Chattanooga. But you don't have a right to drag the UTK brand through the mud. So I just want to say, if our culture, even in a fine, upstanding state like Tennessee, is that confused, then we need help. So this talk, you can boil down everything. Every issue is about either sex or money, pretty much. And so this talk is going to be both. I put this up because it was just unbelievable. People who do this to themselves want people to look at them. And so I don't gross you out after lunch. We'll move on. So what are the social issues? Well, you might say guns, children, murder, sex, drugs, education, budgets, marriage, slavery. It all sounds like social issues. But there's more, because when you get into what's not a social issue, you can say roads and land sales, EPA regulations, licensing, elections. Yet all of these can be corrupted by a lack of morality. And morality is a social issue. So why are people afraid to talk about social issues? And trust me, we're going to all help each other here. But that is the one thing we're uncomfortable with. When we talk about fiscal issues, it seems easy because you can talk about the big bad government and how evil the government is because they're spending our money in the wrong direction. And then we're attacking the government. But when we talk about social issues, we're now talking about the behavior of people, individuals, and people mentally translate that into, wait a minute, what about my son, my nephew, my neighbor, my fellow parishioner, and everybody who comes to my family reunion? Then it gets personal, and we all get a little squeamish. But this slide talks about, yes, we do mix our religion with politics because politics keeps intruding on our religion. And we're not going to get away from it until we get a backbone and stand up and say the truth. So who sets the rules? Okay, people don't. People who say you can't mix your religion and politics, they're saying we can't talk about the difference between right and wrong. And we lost the debate when the rules disallowed our references to a higher authority. And we're headed that way in this country. If we can't appeal to a higher authority, then we need to just shut down the PowerPoint and everybody go home, because there's nothing more to talk about. But yet we deep down inside all do know that there is something we are accountable to. And when I was in the Missouri State Legislature, there was a time when the Bibles would come out in the debate, on the floor, in the chamber. And it was always when we debated the budget. Why would the Bibles come out during the budget debate? Well, usually the people who were in the Democrat side of the aisle would, I remember this vividly one night. Now, I was there for 8 years, so I had 8 grueling budget debates. But one night in particular was very funny because this gentleman stood up and he read from his Bible and he said, I am a preacher and it says right here you're supposed to take care of the widows and orphans. And then another gentleman stood up with his Bible and he said, and I'm the son of a preacher and it says right here you're supposed to feed the poor. And then I stood at my microphone and I said, I'm a church pianist. And it says you're supposed to whip out your own wallet and do it yourself. So we don't need more laws, we need more virtue. Because in the absence of virtue, the only choice is to have more laws. And that's where the lawmakers get their job security from. But it really is about righteousness versus unrighteousness. So you cannot make people righteous through laws, but you can make them less righteous through laws. So good laws will encourage people to behave in less. If you have, let me move on to this because you'll get this. How many people got abortions after the law said it's the law of the land that any woman can get an abortion at any time? The law led the way and took away a part of some people's conscience and prohibition, their personal prohibition. So while laws cannot make people better, the gun control laws have not stopped bad people from hurting other people. Campaign contribution laws have not made the politicians more honest. Tell me when that's happened. Yeah. No, all these ethics laws, and I was there for so many years, and campaign contribution laws change every year. Somebody has some great idea. We can make the legislators more ethical if we only pass more ethical laws, yes. Reporting and cumbersome paperwork, and it really is the game of gotcha. And the people who use those campaign finance laws are usually the Democrats or the Republicans as a party, trying to make sure they're making the other guy look bad. More education money has not given us smarter, more educated children. So that's a law that has been an utter failure despite what it's supposed to do. But laws can make people worse. Some people will get divorced or refuse to get married in the first place because they're trying to get more money extracted from the government. Some of these mandated reporting laws are downright corrosive to family integrity. You have people who, now if somebody can't tell a pastor in some states about their own problems without fear that the pastor will turn them in, or, if they have problems with their children, they're afraid, well, what if somebody doesn't understand? This Nazi Germany, just to remind those of you of history, the law made people turn in their friends and families to be destroyed by government. On to the Nazi Germany story. You cannot understand Hitler apart from understanding the difference between right and wrong. There are people today, I don't know how many of you have seen Ray Comfort's video, but he goes around interviewing people, and there's even confusion now over whether Hitler was good or bad. That's how messed up we've become. So I wanted to play for you a little quote from Alan Keyes, and he articulated it better than anybody could.
Thinking about it at this debate last night. You have Huckabee and all of these folks who at the values voter debate were so gung-ho about moral issues, and then they get into a context where a question is asked them. First question of the debate was, the economy is America's greatest strength. A Christian person who hears a sentence like that should immediately question that premise, and none of them did. Okay? This material world is not our greatest strength. Our greatest strength is the truth that we were founded on, that we are all of us created equal and endowed by our Creator with our unalienable rights, that God and His authority are the source of human justice and human rights and the human concept that distinguishes right from wrong. That's the greatest strength of America.
Dr. Keyes, now every atheist who's listening is going, aha, there it is, theocracy. Respond.
The country's history is clear. Our liberty is founded on the premise, stated in the Declaration, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Because of those rights, atheists have the right to be atheists. But if the premise is not true, then those rights do not exist. So I defend the premise on behalf of all humanity so that all will be treated with dignity, we must defend, bear witness to the authority of God. And that's what has to happen in America if we're to see the strength of our system of self-government, of our liberty restored. The real issue at stake everywhere in the society right now is our respect for that founding principle which invokes the authority of the Creator God as the basis for justice and legitimate government in this country. Nothing else. Because when you look at all the range of issues we're dealing with, from terrorism to abortion to family to economic issues to Social Security, all of it, at the end of the day, it boils down to a question of whether we'll meet our moral obligations. We are founded on the premise that we are all created equal. If there is no creator, there is no equality. If there is no authority of God, there are no rights. If there are no rights, there is no liberty, no self-government, no due process, no reason to have government based upon consent and elections, and our whole way of life crumbles to the dust. If there is no God, then the natural family, as ordained by God, man and woman living in the context of his will for children and procreation, has no foundation. If we are going to defend the natural family, then we defend it on the basis of the fact that our claim of rights comes from the authority of God, and our understanding of the family must be compatible with the same authority.
So he says it goes back to the Constitution. It goes back to the Bill of Rights. It goes back to who our founders said we are as a people. It goes back to our moral character. So the fiscal issues, although a lot of people like to talk about them because it's more comfortable, they're not the problem. They're the symptom. They're the symptom of the problem, and the problem is the moral decay of our nation. Now, we're blurring the lines here between social and fiscal issues, but Thomas Sowell says this: the assumption that spending more of taxpayers' money will make things better has survived all kinds of evidence that it has made things worse. The black family, which survived slavery, discrimination, poverty, wars, and depressions, began to come apart as the federal government moved in with its well-financed programs to help. And even though Thomas Sowell is referring to his particular ethnicity, it applies to everybody. It is everybody. It is every family is being affected. And Star Parker wrote a book originally called Uncle Sam's Plantation, and then she followed it up with the sequel called The White Ghetto. And she said, if you think you're avoiding it, no. You've got sewers in your communities too. You think you can cover it up with money, but it's just as wrong. And someday your money's going to run out, and then where are you going to go? So there is a moral component in every decision we face. If we turn our back on the founding principles that made us a great country, we're going to make the wrong decision. So here's the Democrat problem, just trying to talk about parties for a minute. They have policies that openly encourage licentious behavior. They believe that intrusive bureaucracies are the answer, that more government, bigger government, more expensive government will cost money, but it's worth it to them. So they're not working. The policies that minimize the importance of family will ultimately destroy the natural protections, and you won't have the accountability that is created by moms and dads knowing what their kids are doing. I was very disappointed with the lack of family in the Democrat structure, and their platform doesn't pretend to support family, though, so they have some truth in advertising there. But even though their policies may seem politically popular, they're not sustainable for any society. This is a funny quote I loved. Jesus said, "I told you to feed the poor, not to get other people to steal money from people to do it." That's the story. We have an obligation not to make everybody else. Here's the Republican problem. They're really confused. Their platform still says some things that support family, but they can't control their candidates. So they're conflicted, and they're sending America very confusing messages about how big government should be. They don't know if they're for it or against it. They're confused about, obviously, many things. But there was an article recently in the paper about how the GOP is now being urged to avoid social issues. And the response was, would it cost them voters? Because most Americans do claim to be in support of family, but all their messages are wind tested ahead of time. And these are calculated plans when they go shift to the left. Recently, they had the homosexual group come to their GOPAC meeting, and it's not going to help them. They believe widening the tent will work, and maybe it will get them more money, but it's eroding their own stool. Nevada. I don't know how many of you have seen this article, but the latest article is the GOP platform has now dropped the position against abortions and gay marriage, much, I believe, to their detriment. Here's the libertarian problem. Once you remove the Judeo-Christian standard, because that's religious, you end up with each one did what was right in his own eyes. So they claim to be interested in fiscal issues, and they claim to have no policy on social issues. But here's a quote recently of what somebody else said, Derek Hunter, about their party. They've turned their party into a gaggle of misfits who want pot and prostitution legalized. Honestly, what does being a libertarian mean beyond legalizing drugs, banging hookers, and sitting by while the rest of the world blows itself up? That's an image problem they have. They also, around the Missouri Capitol, have an image of not brushing teeth or wearing deodorant. So for them, it's more about license than liberty. And I don't know if you can see their banner, but it says pro-choice on everything, Libertarian Party. So who does define the morality? If you cannot refer to the higher power, then the net effect is the same as a classroom of school children with no teacher. You have no common authority, and we now find ourselves in a nation that looks like this. In fact, I snapped a picture of the Missouri State Legislature. And I bet you it looks like your legislatures also. Survival of the fittest. That's what we're going to devolve into if we can't have one common bond, a standard. If we're going to go that direction, you can't argue with facts, and facts are anything I believe in. We're in big trouble. So there are a few quotes I'm going to show you how we can say it better and give you confidence. That's what I'm here about. This is a bad quote, an example of how not to say. Yet, this was on Facebook, and a lot of people liked it because they didn't take time to realize how wrong it was, I'm sure. This was the bad one. The environment and the economy are both really two sides of the same coin. If we cannot sustain the environment, we cannot sustain ourselves. And this poster was put together by Greenpeace. They're not afraid to say something bold and brave to make people think. This is how we need to say it. Social issues and the economic issues are both sides of the same coin. If our foundation is not rooted in God's rules for living, our civilization is not sustainable. Here's another example of a bad quote that somebody put on Facebook. Whether we or our politicians know it or not, nature is party to all our deals and decisions, and she has more votes, a longer memory, and a sterner sense of justice than we do. Right quote? This is the way to say it, folks. Whether we or our politicians know it or not, God is party to all our deals, deeds, and decisions, and He has more votes, a longer memory, and a better handle on justice than we do. Here's another bad quote. The best teachers are those who show you where to look, but don't tell you what to see. Here's the right quote. The best teachers are those who show you where to look and explain it without shading it through the lens of atheism and evolution. We can be just as brazen as they are. We just need to practice a few things. And so that when people are pushing us into the corner, we know how to push back and be proud of our platform and proud of what we believe and not be bullied. The radical homosexuality we're seeing, and my husband said, call it homosexualism, because, and I'm presenting you with a new vocabulary word today, because that's what we're seeing now in our culture. And even though it's all could be lumped together with homosexuality, fornication, and adultery, you don't see clubs forming to promote fornication and adultery the way you see people going into the public schools to promote homosexuality. So it's a little bit different because they've got an aggressive agenda. And the reason we're saying welcome to the mob is they have become a mob. And they've been, if you haven't read my story or recently all over the place about Firefox and how they were bullying the CEO into resigning just because he donated $1,000 to California to promote Prop 8, which said the marriage of a woman and a man is a marriage. So the message they're giving us is, shut up or you could lose your livelihood. And that is a different chapter that we don't want to open. This story with Firefox is not isolated. It's not the only one. It's the only one that made it into the viral domain, but it's happening to other people too. So standing up for our First Amendment rights should be our strong suit. That's what we do well. This is another little poster, I'm afraid, and therefore unquestionably obedient. We need to never let ourselves be unquestionably obedient because of fear. So let me explain. Now, I don't want to give you the illusion I'm going to talk about all the social issues in one afternoon, because we could spend a lot of time on each one, but I'm just going to very briefly light on a few hot buttons so that when you go home, you feel emboldened to and confident in what we believe, how to explain it. It's the crushing belief that the sexes are distinct in deep and meaningful ways that contribute to human flourishing. Now that is the story, real quick, that men and women are different. It predates sin entering the world. God made men and women, and it's that clear. So their differences, if any random man wants to arm wrestle with any random woman, the men usually win. And we can fix this with our vocabulary. And just every time you hear the wrong word, correct people, and it will help us all feel good. So don't let them say gay marriage, because if it's homosexual, it's not marriage. And don't let them say homosexual, because it's perversion. So they're talking about trying to make a perverted fraud that will mimic marriage. If you correct them on that, we'll get somewhere. So what we have here is a light bulb that's been broken, but they threw a little match, and it lit the match, and they're trying to make it look like it does the same thing, but it doesn't. Don't be afraid of rainbows. They're good. Rainbows, God made rainbows. We can't let other people steal them. We have the moral high ground. I just hate it when people talk about the problem of homosexuality and they put a picture of two men or two women doing things they shouldn't be doing, because that is making us look at pornography. Put a nice picture. When you see this picture, you know what truth is. You know what honest families look like. You know that only men and women can bear children. It's the way it is. And there's something noble about doing things right. There's something beautiful about a king and a queen. There's something very deeply satisfying that can enter on any level, that people in their heart do know the truth of right and wrong. Now, this issue tapers into the next one, which is these fertility clinics, because any biologist will tell you that despite man's fabrications, there is only one way to make babies, and that's with a man and a woman, not two men and two women. So children do have a right to be raised by their own mom and dad. And so when we get into all these other issues, the only way they can fabricate a pseudo-family is with the help of fertility clinics. And many of you may not realize, and I didn't myself until I started studying the issue for a bill I was filing, but we think that the fertility clinics are being used by the nice families who can't have children, right? Well, not very close to right, because statistically, a third of all people using their services are lesbians. Another third are women who are not married but don't say that they're lesbians. They just want to have a baby, but they don't want the complexity of some man in their life. What a mess that would be. So only about a third of the people who use their services to produce children actually fall into the category that we would think is socially acceptable. So what we've got now is a whole nother burgeoning industry. This is a picture of a young man who actually has 150 siblings. He was donor conceived, and we don't have any regulations on it. And without a moral conscience over right and wrong, this is only one story. There are plenty more, and it's not right. I think this is child abuse to put this shirt on any child and deny him from permanently ever being able to know his origins. So that's the direction we're going, folks. This is the brave, new, awful world we're headed. Little pro-life message for you. So many people, I know everybody here is very fiercely pro-life, and we understand this, but these two twins have not been born yet, and the one says, hey, brother, do you think there's a life after birth? Do you believe in mom? Nah, I don't believe these things. I'm an atheist. I mean, have you ever seen mom? That's the message. You know, there's some things that we know that are clear and obvious, that are so easy to understand. And the more mental gyrations the people who are pushing the left agenda have, the less they're getting it, the more confused they are.
She didn't dispute the fact that Christians love, but that it didn't feel very loving. Do you understand why someone could see it that way?
I understand why some people could feel when they're cutting the head off their baby.
Well, so that doesn't sound loving.
You're right.
I mean, and the words you're using aren't loving.
Little baby boys and girls are taken into that building, and when they use the suction machine, they're torn apart.
I love the quote because it is about love, and we are more loving. And for this reporter to say that you're not being loving is putting us in a corner. We are more loving than anyone else because we care about families. We care about individuals. We care about how to help people in a real way. I didn't know Kel Zastrow was going to be mentioned in an earlier presentation, but the way he says it is so true and so right. And I wish that for all of us because it is about love. Another loving point, and this is good for us to know, women who have abortions are 6 times more likely to commit suicide. That statistic right there shows that we do care about everybody. Whoops, do we need to, go ahead, please, feel free. And this presentation will be available later too. If you want to get it, I encourage all of you, because the facts are facts. This is not me making up stuff. This is truth, and it's going to help you and make you bold and strong and brave. And we're going to have a better culture if we can all learn a few things and beyond. We already have the moral high ground. We just need to let people know that it's okay to be pro-life. The biggest there are a few problems. I'm going to just name a few problems that are making us quiet, embarrassed in the corner. Problem number one is we have people in our society who are telling us that anything religious is automatically discounted or doesn't count, or, off the table. We can't debate it if it's religious. And that is evil, because what they're doing is changing the rules. If the rules are that we can't talk about anything that relates to God, we're in trouble. Here's a slide of Billy Graham. He says, our society strives to avoid any possibility of offending anyone except God. And if you think about it, that's what's at the heart of people being embarrassed to talk about social issues. We're like, well, I can't say anything because if it mentions God, then it doesn't count. Well, yeah, it does count. It does count, because how else are we going to create a conscience for people? And this cultural confusion is going to destroy our progress. This is a quote from Charlton Heston. He says, ask the Romans if powerful nations have ever fallen as a result of cultural division. And our cultural division is what's taking our country down. We can't have cultural unity if we go off the standard. Problem number two is we tend to follow the leader. Everybody is it's in our human nature. I actually had 3 sheep, and my son came in one day and said, I just saw the craziest thing ever. Sheep number 1 ran into the fence and gave himself a bloody nose. And then sheep number 2 did the same thing, and sheep number 3 did the same thing. And we're giving ourselves bloody noses because we're afraid to stop and look at it. And this is a story about in Great Britain today, there are more women working than men. Just an interesting little fact. People are so busy trying to chase whatever. Problem number 3, churches are tolerating this. Now, when I use the word church, I use it to speak of all churches, every church. 61% of Americans believe pastors and churches should challenge Obama on the religious liberty issues. So why aren't they? Why aren't they? This is our country. This is the foundation. The pastors in church are not only allowed to address civic and government issues, but they're directed to do so when civil law violates God's law. So they're not being the church. It's time. In fact, the American people expect it to happen. We want to see a show. People want the church to be the church. We need to play game on. We need to say we're ready for the fight. And I think the biggest disappointment in watching what's gone on with Hobby Lobby and all the other businesses that are being bullied by Obamacare is the fight's not been more vigorous. We want to see ourselves win. We want to see us shame the other guys into humiliation and actually come out victorious and send a message to them that you don't do that anymore. Problem number 4, we expect our elected officials to be principled. Yeah, I wonder why we look at people who are evil, call them up and ask them to do what's right, and then are surprised when they do things that are evil. So we hang petty thieves and appoint great ones to public office. We keep asking people who are evil to behave differently. Now, this is why we need to have a better choice of who's in office, because this is not serving us well. Problem number 5 is our ability to obtain justice is related to the morality of our culture. So while we watch the culture deteriorate, it's going to metastasize and affect every one of us. Now, this is one of my favorite cartoons. For those of you who can't see it, the judge is instructing the attorney, and he says, defense counsel will cease placing air quotes around his references to the justice system. Yeah, because how do you get a good jury anymore? If you can't have the population in an aggregate believe in right and wrong, what's left for any of us?
Amen.
So here's some solutions to take home with you. Our first solution is our freedom of speech, which is very cool. We all have mouths. We don't have to be in the majority party to be a conscience for our country or our city or our state. You can go ask your pastor to get a little brave. If he won't listen, go to a different church. There are good priests and rabbis and pastors who are brave enough to speak the truth. Not a lot of them, but that is their mission. I give some examples of Father Chirico and Daniel Lampin, who we've already talked about with some people, really good guys. They just need us to, they need to find us, really. Another solution is our freedom of the press. We can write. I write a newsletter, a book, or a blog. If you don't want to take the time to write your own forward mine, forward Daryl's. We all spend time telling the story. I write one every week. You can find it at cynthiadavis.net, and you can get a little infusion of truth and help you say what you need to say to other people. And it will, if you don't want to have it come out of your mouth, because you don't want to talk about social issues, just forward on my newsletter. Say, I just got this in my inbox and thought you'd find it interesting. What do you think? Social media has helped us. It costs us very little. This slide says this revolution will be tweeted, because we do have other venues that don't cost much, and it is effective, and it is making a difference, and it is making people think. And even Randy Stuffelbeam can tell you that it was a few years ago when I got on his Facebook and I asked him serious questions about the Constitution Party, and he helped change the way I thought. You can change other people in your own way with your own words. Yeah, solution number 3 is our freedom of religion. We cannot let them disarm us, because we're being disarmed when we're told we can no longer use our Bible in public debate, that counts for nothing. Well, you know what? Our biblical illiteracy is taking us down as a country. But that doesn't mean we can't keep reminding people and helping them to become literate. The truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. Just let it loose and it will defend itself. This is just a funny cartoon my husband made. He says, I can't explain to you the 7 trumpets of Revelation, but I can blow one in your ear and warn you to escape the wrath to come. So the answer is you. You, everyone here. This is so cool, having people who stay around on a Saturday afternoon to hear about social issues for dummies, even though it doesn't apply to any of you. Yeah, we're here to hold people accountable every day, every way, every time the opportunity presents itself. You're going to have way more opportunities than I will, because you have different networks. And every time you infuse yourself and your philosophy into your network, you are making a difference in the culture. So the summary is this. It's all social issues. You got that part right, folks? It's all social. Social issues cannot be understood apart from morality. And morality cannot be understood apart from understanding that men are subject to the laws of nature and nature's God. And they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And that is so exquisite and eloquent that I can't even improve on that. So here's the conclusion. I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. Now it's time to change the things I cannot accept. Thank you.